Caligula has gone down in history as one of ancient Rome's most tyrannical emperors. Caligula ruled Rome for just 4 years, but in those years, he gained reputation for his cruelty and was known to be an absolute nutcase. But the question is, were some of the things Caligula did greatly exaggerated? Most of what we know from Caligula comes from the ancient Roman writer Suetonius and Dio Cassius. Suetonius' most famous work was his biographies of the first 12 Caesars. With his position close to the imperial court, he was able to access private sources for his writings. Dio Cassius was a Roman senator of Greek origin. He was an historian and author of the famous book Roman History, which large parts of the book are only known in Byzantine excerpts. That is to say, both of these men are credible sources. The interesting thing was they both lived decades after Caligula's reign and based their works on legend. So that would mean the history of Caligula is tied to both fact and fiction. Now let us get started with Caligula's early life. Caligula was born in August 31st, 12 AD, Anzio, Italy. Caligula's parents were Germanicus, a renowned Roman general, and his mother Agrippina the Elder. They both had 6 children: Nero, not to be confused with Emperor Nero, Drusus, Agrippina the Younger, Julia Drusilla, Julia Livilla, and of course Caligula, properly known as Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus. At the time of Gaius' birth, the rule of the first Roman Emperor Augustus was coming to an end. Augustus' health was getting worse, and he needed to name a successor. Augustus appointed an unpopular leader, his stepson Tiberius. Augustus knew that the people would not be pleased with his decision, so he pressured Tiberius to adopt Germanicus as his son and name him his successor. Tiberius played an important role that shaped Caligula, but more on that later. Gaius was the 3rd son of Germanicus, and at the age of 3, he and his mother lived at his father's posting on the Rhine. When Gaius was stationed with his troops at the Roman camps, his mother would dress Gaius up in a little Roman uniform with little army boots. These ancient boots were called caliga, which meant little boots. The soldiers were entertained by his little soldier outfit, so much so they called him Caligula, and it stuck for the rest of his life. It was said that Gaius hated being called Caligula. In August 19th, 14 AD, Augustus died in Nola, Italy, leaving Tiberius to inherit the role of the second emperor. Tiberius wavered at naming a successor. Caligula's father was the best choice, but Tiberius was jealous of him and sent Germanicus to Rome's eastern provinces for a diplomatic mission. While Germanicus was there, he fell ill, and in 17 AD, Germanicus died a mysterious death. His death was grieved throughout the empire, as he was seen as a courageous and honorable man. There was speculation that Tiberius was linked to Germanicus' death, because he was a political rival. Caligula's mother Agrippina the Elder publicly blamed Tiberius for Germanicus' death, and wanted revenge. Due to the plotting of the Praetorian Guard Sejanus, Agrippina the Elder and Caligula's older brother Nero were arrested. Around as early as 27 AD. In 29 AD, they were exiled to the Pontian Islands off the coast of Naples. Caligula's second brother Drusus was arrested in 30 AD. Older brother Nero committed suicide in 31 AD, and within a couple of years, Agrippa and Drusus died of starvation. During this time, Caligula was spared due to his young age, and was forced to live with his great-grandmother Livilla, Augustus' wife. At this time, it was believed that Caligula had committed incest with his sister, Drusilla. Praetorian prefect Sejanus had his own political agenda, and almost completely destroyed the Julio-Claudian dynasty, which started from Augustus. In October 18th, 31 AD, Caligula was now in his late teens. He was lucky as Tiberius caught on to Sejanus' scheming, probably because Tiberius thought he was going to be betrayed and murdered for the title of emperor. He was arrested, and the people of Rome celebrated. But there were many men linked to Sejanus that were to be targeted in a sort of witch hunt. This resulted in most of Sejanus' family being executed. The next appointed Praetorian prefect was Macro. He will be important a bit later. The same year, Caligula was summoned to the isolated islands of Capri to be adopted and live with Tiberius, his father's supposed killer, and Gemellus, Tiberius' grandson, and Caligula's cousin. Tiberius retired from public life and moved to Capri in 26 AD. Caligula was treated more like a pampered prisoner. Caligula was forced to suppress his anger and was to show Tiberius respect, even though he hated Tiberius with good reason. Caligula, who lost his mother and 2 brothers, must have had a huge impact on him. But to make things worse, Caligula was likely mentally traumatized by the situation of Tiberius. According to many historians, Caligula took his bottled up emotions on others. He also enjoyed watching torture and executions. He also spent his nights in orgies. Even Tiberius knew that Caligula was disturbed. Tiberius supposedly said, "I am nursing a viper for the Roman people." By 33 AD, Caligula was appointed to Quaesitor by Tiberius. In March of 37 AD, Tiberius fell ill. He later died a month later. There were rumors that Caligula and his powerful friend Praetorian prefect Macro plotted to kill Tiberius, and was said to have poisoned him or smothered him with a pillow. Caligula also had Macro bring Tiberius's will to the Senate, and had it declared null and void, and as a result, removed Gemellus from the title of emperor. It is also said that Caligula provoked his grandmother's death by treating her with great disrespect, but this is debatable. With Gemellus out of the picture, 24-year-old Caligula knew he would be the third Roman emperor. With the help and support of Macro, Caligula was immediately hailed as princeps, first citizen, by the Senate in 37 AD. Not much sooner, when Caligula got back to Rome, the Senate bestowed upon him all the powers of the imperial office. Caligula had the Roman army on his side, because they were very loyal to Caligula's father, and wanted to see Caligula as ruler. Caligula, who had no experience in government or fighting wars, was made emperor of Rome. Caligula lightly hinted and dropped an initial request for the deification of the previous emperor Tiberius. There was much excitement to the new emperor. After the dark later years of Tiberius, the people of Rome were very happy to have Caligula as emperor. They thought he would be like his honorable father. Caligula started off as a great emperor. He abolished Tiberius's gruesome treason trials, helped people affected by the imperial tax system. He banished sexual deviance, and paid generous bonuses to the Praetorian Guard. He staged extravagant events such as chariot races, plays, boxing matches, and of course, gladiator shows. Caligula even ordered his mother and brother's bones to be retrieved to be placed in the tomb of Augustus. Caligula completed a number of buildings. He built a lighthouse in Balloon, began work on new aqueducts. He even ordered a new amphitheater in Pompeii. Within 6 months of being emperor, everything changed. Caligula got deathly ill. Many historians are divided on the cause: a possible breakdown, epilepsy, or even poisoning. Caligula became a different person when he recovered from his illness. Caligula was said to be tall and hairy. It was rumored that Caligula made it a capital offense to mention a goat in his presence. Caligula was said to have been tortured by headaches and wandered the palace at night. It was even said that he dressed as a woman. Caligula boasted his power. He even executed Gemellus in late 37 or early 38 AD. It was for the alleged plotting against Caligula when he was ill. Praetorian prefect Marco, which played a big part in Caligula becoming emperor, was not safe as well. Caligula had seen the potential threat that Macro posed with him rapidly gaining power, and would soon remove him out of office. Some sources say that Macro was promised the governorship of Egypt, but after arriving to ship out, he was arrested and stripped of his office in 38 AD. It was said Macro took his own life soon after. Caligula was said not to get along with others. Suetonius was said to have a frequent quote of Caligula's, "Remember that I have the right to do anything to anybody." Caligula was said to have tortured high-ranking senators by making them run long distances in front of his chariot. Caligula was also said to have affairs with his allies' wives, and would talk about how well the wives performed in bed. Caligula was said to have had incest with all of his 3 sisters. This idea was first published by Suetonius. What is interesting is that Suetonius wrote his book, The Lives of the Caesars, in 121 AD. That is 80 years after Caligula was assassinated. Early historians that lived under Caligula's rule made no mention of incest, namely chroniclers such as Philo and Seneca. They both had harsh criticisms of Caligula. In fact, the historian Tacitus accused Caligula's sister Agrippina the Younger, which was wife to Claudius, of incest with her son. Caligula was never mentioned in the accusation. There is one exception. There was a close bond with Caligula and his sister Julia Drusilla. When Caligula became emperor, he had Drusilla divorce and remarry to Caligula's friend Marcus Aemilius Lepidus. When Caligula became ill, he changed his will to name Drusilla his successor. This would have made Drusilla the first woman to be named heir in an imperial will. Caligula and Drusilla were said to be lovers, but like I said before, it still isn't confirmed. Just after Caligula recovered from his illness in 38 AD, Drusilla became ill. Caligula stayed by her side until she died, and would not let anyone remove her body. She died when she was around 22 years old. Most likely cause was a plague. It was at that point Caligula had Drusilla deified. She was buried with the honors of an Augusta, which was the female equivalent of Augustus. It was an indicator of worldly power, or near divinity. This title was as if Drusilla was Caligula's wife. Caligula had the Roman Senate declare Drusilla as a goddess as Diva Drusilla. A year later, Caligula named his only daughter, Julia Drusilla, after his dead sister, who was born in 39 AD by Caligula's wife, Milona Caesona. I know what you're thinking. It still sounds like Caligula and Drusilla were more than just very close siblings. Here's the other side of the coin. Some sources say that Drusilla earned poor reputation because of the close bond with Caligula. She was even compared to a prostitute by later scholars. This was most likely an attempt to discredit Caligula. This is also backed up by some historians that pose the idea that Caligula was not motivated by lust or love for his sisters, but in recreating the joint brother and sister rulers that become tradition in other great empires. This would likely explain why Caligula's colleagues seen him as a power-crazy despot. That is why Caligula could have been seen more as a threat than that of absolute rulers such as Augustus and the unpopular Tiberius. So where did the incest rumors come from? They could have originated from the formal Roman dining habits. It was tradition in ruling class households for the host of a dinner to hold positions of honor at banquets in the house. If that were Caligula, he would hold the position of honor to his 3 sisters, which would all take turns in rotation. Apparently Caligula broke that rule and only let his sister Drusilla take the seat. Caligula supposedly said that Drusilla was his wife and the female head of the household. We can't be sure he said that, but what I find interesting is Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, the widowed husband of Drusilla, was reported to be a lover of Caligula's other sisters, Julia, Livilla, and Agrippina the Younger. Marcus attempted to gain support to overthrow Caligula. Caligula's 2 sisters were also said to be involved in the conspiracy. They were eventually discovered by Caligula. Marcus was executed, while Livilla and Agrippina were exiled to the Pontine Islands. Maybe the reason Caligula didn't want his other 2 sisters to sit in the position of honor was because he knew something was up, and he just didn't trust them, and possibly wanted to humiliate them. That is speculation, of course. Drusilla seemed to be the only trustworthy person in Caligula's life at the time, and if Caligula was paranoid, he would only trust her. Maybe that is why many perceive Caligula and Drusilla were more than just siblings. To me it seems to be more like dinner table gossip than fact. Caligula was said to have waged a continuous war with the Jewish population in Judah, who had issues with the Greeks. When the Jews did not give Caligula the respect he deserved, apparently Caligula threatened to have a statue of himself created in the Temple of Jerusalem, but was convinced not to, in order to prevent further revolting. Here is a different interpretation of the story. It was said that Caligula played both sides, showing the Greeks as yes-men. When everything seemed to be going downhill for the Jews, Caligula changed his mind and said the statue could be cancelled. 2 slightly different variations of the history, but it makes a big difference. Whether Caligula was maniacal or reasonable of the issue with the Jews and the Greeks, we would most likely never know. According to Suetonius, Caligula loved one of his horses, Incest, to the point he gave the horse a marble stall, an ivory manger, a jeweled collar, and a house. It was even said Caligula planned to make his horse consul. That is but many of the weird stunts Caligula would supposedly have done as emperor. But the question is, did Caligula do these things because he was insane? Or could it be that these stunts were designed to humiliate senators and other elites? If Caligula gave Incest high public office, it would make the government officials look bad. To say Caligula's horse could do a better job was humiliating. That would explain why the Senate despised Caligula by the end of his reign. Speaking of weird stunts, Caligula had an abandoned plan to invade Britain, and where he sent his soldiers to collect seashells, and then called it off. You can call this act crazy, but that might not be the whole picture. The word seashells was also Roman soldiers' slang for engineers' huts. Since Caligula was at Roman camps as a kid, he would know soldier slang, so it is possible that Caligula could have said pick up the huts. That could have been a misunderstanding by commoners. An alternate reason for the invasion of Britain could be that Caligula wanted to carry out exercises to enforce discipline. Invasion of Britain was probably never planned out because the Roman soldiers most likely refused. So Caligula had the soldiers conquer Neptune and had the soldiers parade their victory in the streets of seashells. I can't argue that Caligula's tactic was very bizarre, but allegedly the soldiers were going to revolt. The revolt, of course, did not go down so well, so Caligula humiliated the troops in front of their families. Many label Caligula's leadership skills as terrible, But if they were so terrible, like many historians have argued, how did Caligula manage to annex new provinces, expanding westward? Regardless of the motives for the invasion of Britain, Caligula got no further than the English Channel, and he was soon assassinated after. But Caligula's measures for the invasion allowed the next Roman Emperor Claudius to begin the conquest of Britain in 43 AD, which was successful. According to Suetonius, Caligula was once said to have ordered the construction of a temporary floating bridge across the Bay of Bai, just so Caligula could ride epically from one side to the other. There haven't been any remnants of a bridge ever discovered, so many historians write it off as myth. However, there was an amazing discovery in the early 20th century. In the late 1920s and early 1930s, workers found two massive pleasure barges, complete with marble decor, mosaic floors, and statues, at Lake Nemi. This was evident of Caligula's excessive lifestyle. One of the shipwrecks had a lead pipe that had the inscription, "Property of Gaius Caesar Augustus Germanicus." These two ships are considered to this day as two of the most awe-inspiring ships of ancient times. But sadly, a fire caused by Allied shells greatly destroyed the ships in 1944. Caligula, humiliated the Senate, had an expensive lifestyle that drained the Roman treasury, and was most likely paranoid and thought everyone was going to kill him. It is not a surprise that some people would want Caligula dead. There were 4 assassination attempts on Caligulas life. Only one succeeded, of course. Caligula was suspicious of his joint Praetorian prefects, Marcus Arsenius Clemens, and an unknown collaborator. The Senate, the Praetorian Guard, Equestrian Order were planning Caligula's assassination, but in order to avoid execution, they found a willing assassin, Praetorian officer Cassius Curia, who was supposedly ridiculed by Caligula at court for his feminine behavior. On January 41 AD, Cassius Curia, with 2 other military accomplices, went to Caligula's palace and stabbed him to death. He died at 28 or 29 years old. They also killed Caligula's 4th wife, Caesona, and their only daughter, Julia Drusilla. The Senate tried to use the death of Caligula to re-establish the Roman Republic, but the Roman people were horrified of Caligula's death. They actually respected him. The Senate were the ones that hated Caligula. If the people of Rome supposedly detested Caligula, they wouldn't have wanted Caligula's uncle Claudius as emperor. The Julio-Claudian dynasty would continue to stay in power for another 17 years, until Nero's suicide in 68 AD. So what is my take on Caligula's 4-year reign? Well, in my opinion, Caligula shown as a sadistic tyrant is greatly exaggerated. If he was bad as the ancient historian said he was, the Senate could have just thrown him out. Caligula did have a reason to be unhinged. He did go through a tough childhood. He lost his father, mother, and brothers, which must have scarred young Caligula. It didn't help that Tiberius could have reinforced Caligula's mental trauma by teaching torture, executions, and lust for power as acceptable actions. Any other person would have gone insane under Caligula's conditions, yet he still managed to have great accomplishments. Most of the historical accounts of Caligula being an insane lunatic with absolute power comes from Suetonius, which was born 30 years after, only to write 50 years later. That is a big gap in history. Suetonius may be a credible source, but he was more concerned with moral examples and telling a great story over sticking to that of modern historical practices adopted today. The story of Incest becoming consul and turned the imperial palace into a brothel came from Suetonius. Other stories of Caligula could have also come from gossip and rumors. Future emperors also could have had motive to make Caligula's reign look horrible in order to discredit the Julio-Claudian dynasty. That is one of history's main flaws. People look at historical documents as absolute fact, without recognizing people from history had motives to write what they deemed to them as important. Human error also comes to mind. Of course, Caligula was no angel. Caligula achieved a level of power anyone would dream of. At the young age of just 24, his lack in responsibility and expensive lifestyle could have also contributed to how he was perceived. Apparently Caligula also thought of himself as a god, so he could have let power go to his head. Caligula may have not been up to the task of ruling a massive empire, and as a result was assassinated for it. But to me and other people, he doesn't deserve the bad reputation he has gotten in history. If a rumor is said enough, another can interpret it as fact. I think that is what it comes down to. So what do you guys think? Is Caligula a horrible tyrant, or was he misrepresented in history? Let me know in the comment section below. If you have any other questions for me or suggested topics for future videos, let me know as well. If you like the content and want more history videos like this one, like and subscribe. It really helps me out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.